class. Dr. O here. Today I'm going to talk about the cost of taxation. Last class we learned about welfare economics and social welfare and the economy measure consumer surplus, producer surplus as a together total surplus, and we can call social welfare. That welfare can be measured under the name of welfare economics and analyze and compare to the other situations. Try to figure out which one is more efficient or not. So the concept of consumer surplus, how we can measure it, producer surplus as well, is really important thing we note from the lesson lecture. By understanding that, we move on to the real life applications. Like several economic situation happens, what is the welfare changes? In that perspective, yeah, if you are not comfortable with the consumer surplus, producer surplus, how we can measure it, you need to go over it one more time. As I remember, refresh your memory, consumer surplus is like this. When consumers are participating in the market, they have willingness to pay. So every individual consumer has their subjective valuation of each one of goods and services by themselves. That is necessary to measure the consumer surplus. Why? If there is no market and they just want to consume the product or service, then they need to search it and then approach the producer and they offer what they want and how much they're willing to pay. But because of the existence of the market, they're just participating and they only pay market equilibrium price, which is less than their willingness to pay. So only willingness to pay is higher than equilibrium price, they will purchase that goods or services. By doing so, the difference between their willingness to pay, subjective valuation minus equilibrium price, in the market sense as a group, total consumers will have surplus benefit by participating in the market. So somebody who will evaluate more relative to the equilibrium price, they will have surplus because of existence of the market. So that is coming out from the concept of consumer surplus, producer surplus, similar approach, the market equilibrium price and their cost to produce a unit product. If there is no market existence, then they need to find out the consumer or buyer. So they want to sell it, willing to sell it because the unit cost to produce one more product is their cost, then they need to charge with that. But market equilibrium price is higher than that. Producer side also have surplus. That is producer surplus. In competitive market, the aggregate consumer surplus and producer surplus is maximized, and we measure that as the conditions of or measure of market efficiency. So aggregate that total amount or area is biggest under the competitive market. So without any intervention of government or other outside of force, we can make the most efficient solution as the market system. So the argument from the market or mainstream economists say that market system is the best and most efficient system so far human beings are using. So those concepts you need to understand. Today we are going to bring out some examples under the exact situation as taxation today, then using that taxation case to think about consumer surplus change and producer surplus change when government intervene the market with taxation. So the cost of taxation is the key, and what will happen after tax relative to the before tax. Under just a competitive market situation, market equilibrium price, and then consumer surplus and producer surplus is only a component of social welfare or total surplus. But now government intervened the market and tax revenue is happening, but there is something else happening, which is the cost of taxation intrinsically. Well, that part, that area is also called dead weight loss, DWL in abbreviation. So I introduced the concept of deadweight loss, and deadweight loss is loss of efficiency. So those area we can measure it as a graphical presentation, and we're looking at it how we can minimize those things, and what is the factor to determine the size of deadweight loss. We're going to study that. And other thing is the relationship between those vectors and once tax is imposed and what is the deadweight loss and the factor changes deadweight loss, how they changes correspondingly will be discussed a little bit very later part. Today's section is relatively short, but it is applying from what we've learned last time as consumer surplus, produce surplus, and all those social welfare area or measurement. So it's very advanced relative to the previous class. But it is not that difficult or complicated, so let's get into it. Now we are looking at the effect of tax. This one is we already studied before, and I showed you about the change of tax. Then once tax is imposed, we learned about effect of tax a little bit in the sense of tax incidence. Even though tax is imposed in buyer side or seller side to the supplier or to the consumer, the two groups will share about the tax amount. How it can happen? The tax amount of $10 originally equilibrium price, and we can see that even though demand curve shift to the left or supply curve shift to the left, the tax amount or the vertical difference is the same as a tax amount, but consumer side of the burden and producer side of the burden is separated and determined by elasticity. Well, so in that perspective, deadweight loss or change of it is heavily depending on elasticity. It's very logical and intuitive, and you can see that in the later part of this lecture. But first, what are going to looking at it and then recall about the previous lectures. Taxes imposed saying supply side tax is imposed to the seller side or supply side. So supply curve shift to the left. Then equilibrium price moving to the left. Like a price increases and equilibrium quantity decreases. But that is not the only one, right? The equilibrium price means that we transacted at the market with that price. So buyer will pay, increase the price of it, but seller collected that amount, but they need to pay that amount. So remaining of seller will take after tax is less than that. So that will shows the vertical difference of tax, and the higher value is buyer will pay, and lower value is recognized as price of seller, PS. The top one or higher one is as marked as a PB. As you can see the graph right here, you can see area is a differentiate, but you can see you can remember the previous lecture how we can separate it as tax incidence. So buyer side of burden, because of the taxation or taxes imposed, The area B is burden for the buyer or demand side. Consumers will have this burden, consumer's burden, and total burden aggregate the area. And also D area is supply side, right? Original equilibrium price is in the middle of that. Because of the taxes imposed, the buyer will pay that amount, but that amount itself is directly transferred from the seller to the government. So that total amount B and D is, in other words, tax revenue. Tax amount is that vertical distance, and the quantity transacted in the market is the QT after T. So that area, rectangular area itself is a tax revenue. So tax revenue itself is B plus D. So yeah, you can understand under the previous lecture, separating which area means what type of thing. So this area separation is coming out from the equilibrium price, originally in the middle of PB and PS. Then yeah, the buyer is paying more than that, and quantity is reduced, and the tax amount transferred from the seller to the government, and PS is actually each one of the unit the firm or seller will take from that transaction. So area itself is comfortable as you understand, and that area itself is easy to understand because of the previous lecture. So far so good. And what have we learned as a consumer surplus? Originally, the price is in the middle of PB and PS. Then the consumer surplus area is A plus B plus C. Everybody following me? Yeah, in same logic, producer surplus is DEF area. Good. So before tax, consumer surplus is A plus B plus C, and producer surplus was DEF. So total surplus or social welfare can be aggregate consumer surplus plus producer surplus, right? At this as well. So total area A to F, all A, B, C, D, E, F. Total area is total surplus of the social welfare. So far that explanation is clear, I guess. And now let's think about this. Now, after-tax transaction amount is QT. Because of taxation, the price will jump up and transaction amount is reduced. So actually the QT, after the QT, will not transacted in the market. So that area we cannot get any surplus. And also in after tax, the consumer surplus is reduced a lot because at this point, producer need to pay PB. So the PB above the PB area, below the demand curve, which is reflecting willing to pay of each unit or each one of the component of the demand curve, somebody have willing to pay that amount. So the area A only can be the consumer surplus after tax. Correspondingly, producer surplus is less than PS because they only take a PS to them because after tax they need to pay that tax amount, PB minus PS, this is tax amount. So below that PS and above the supply curve, so only F area is producer surplus. So after tax, producer surplus and consumer surplus reduce huge amount of area. So A and F is only demand the consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, what do we have in our community or economy? So B and D is nothing but tax revenue. Tax revenue is government hold it, so that amount can be used future purpose. like a public service. So that amount is not gone anywhere, but transferred from the private transaction to the government for government purpose. So after tax total surplus or social welfare is ABDF is only. So what we lost? C and E area is lost. That is other words we called deadweight loss. It is originally calculated by the economist Haberger. So in other words, we're calling it Haberger's triangle. If the demand curve and supply curve shape looks like similar like this or linear function in general cases, that DWL or deadweight loss area looks like a triangle. And that triangle originally Haberger's introduced. So Haberger's triangle, or in other words, deadweight loss. So deadweight loss is C plus E. So we know C plus E amount of triangular area is lost before to the after tax situation. So taxation, the cost of taxation in general in social welfare purpose, C and E area, deadweight loss is the cost of taxation. What is the logic of this? Because of tax, the transaction or the price is increases. So transact quantity, equilibrium quantity reduced from the QE to the QT. That's the main driving force of cost of taxation. In other words, the size of deadweight loss. So we can guess that, oh yeah, the cost of taxation can be impacted by the shape of supply and demand curve. In other words, elasticity. So we looking at some of the questions in the labor market, right? Government intervene in the markets under the sense what kind of outcome or impact is happening under that government economic policy. We can see the factor or the change or magnitude of impact is originally coming out from the shape of supply curve and demand curve. In other words, elasticity. So we can measure with the shape of it, the degree of responsiveness measured by elasticity, and in other words, in logical format or using the diagram or graph, that is the shape of demand and supply. So deadweight loss can be happened by the magnitude of change from equilibrium quantity before and after tax. That's the point. The size of deadweight loss is the magnitude of change of transaction quantities, which is coming out from, or originally we can guess or measured by elasticity or the shape of supply and demand curve. So first thing we need to note is area change, right? So the consumer surplus originally A plus B plus C, producer surplus is D plus E plus F, but after tax, A and F is consumer and producer surplus only, and the B and D is a tax revenue, and C and E is gone as deadweight loss, the cost of taxation. Now let me explain about a little bit more. I'm just showing you the graph of it. So how deadweight loss is impacted by the shape of supply and demand curve, and more specifically, if the supply curve is a more elastic or inelastic, what will happen? The first graph we can see right here, supply curve is more steeper, which is inelastic supply curve. So in elastic cases, the vertical length itself is a tax amount, right? That tax amount, the size of tax, and we can measure deadweight loss as yellow triangular shape. And another graph we can see is supply curve is a little bit flatter, which is more elastic. In that case, this vertical distance is exactly same as the previous graph or other graph, and the yellow triangle shape is way bigger than another one. So supply curve is more elastic, deadweight loss is higher. You can see direct impact out of it. Let's move on to the demand side. It's easy intuitively, right? So demand curve is inelastic relative to elastic cases. You can see those two graphs right there, and then see the compare with the area of yellow triangle. So you can see more elastic demand cases, deadweight loss is higher, or the deadweight loss is bigger for that. So how we can guess that? How we can directly prove this? So vertical distance, let's say that is base of triangle, and we draw the 90-degree angle to the distance from the original equilibrium point to the size of text vertical line. So the quantity is hugely impacted by the price changes or after tax. That means that the demand or supply is more elastic. So transaction quantity reduced more. So base or the size of tax amount is exactly the same. The height of triangle is increasing by elasticity. So elasticity is more elastic, right, than the area of triangle, which is deadweight loss, increases. So as long as shape or demand curve or supply curve is properly estimated, we can measure that deadweight loss or the impact or cost of taxation can be measured with this deadweight loss area, yellow triangle area. So what is the key? Shape of supply or demand curve, or in other words, elasticity as a measurement. It has been a huge debate about the size of government. Well, it is a political debate too, like a bigger government or smaller government, perfectly laissez-faire style of, political philosopher think of. Or on the side, yeah, we need some kind of adjustment. So nowadays, as I told you, inequality issue is brought up and everybody talk about it. And as I mentioned in history too, yeah, always it is fighting each other with it from the Cold War, before Cold War, and even macro policy. There is a lot of argument about this. What size of government is proper? So it is a relating issue with the politics. So it is kind of messy to discuss all the history of it. But one thing is clear is, yeah, we need a government. In that perspective, taxation is necessary. Well, someone say necessary evil. Someone say, it is essential to provide proper justice as a community. Yeah, country can be the size of community, what type of thing, political decision is necessary, but still, those kind of agreement among our member in community is necessary. But still, like economics too, mainstream too, like there is a little bit of intervention approved side of economists exist, or someone doesn't like that idea, like neoliberalism policy, and that is also kind of trend. And historically, economics also driven by big two schools. It's more like macro type of schools, but still does have strong fundamentals of philosophy. Like one side is classical schools and another side is Keynesian schools. I introduced the other day Keynesian Hayek debate or rap battle. If you can search it, you can see that. That is more like a macro type of economic policy, but still does have the idea that small government or bigger government side of debate. So it's been a while. Every time we think about it, and mainstream economists, while we are learning the welfare economics, especially, the most efficient solution is no touch to the market system is the best. The efficient point of view, as we proved as the social welfare perspective, yeah, no touch or no intervention of the market is the most efficient solution. But in other words, what type of government intervention is necessary? Intrinsically, government doesn't have any profit pursuing service or business they're doing. They are doing some kind of political decision or make community members' happiness we consider to making a justice or right thing to do. But yeah, it is lots of agreement of members is necessary. So that is another side of political decisions is necessary, but it has been always the issue. Like, let's make a market doing correctly. But another issue is like this. Market system is efficient as long as the theory goes. But in reality, it is not like that. Market fails under the certain situation, whatever the reason is coming out. As I told you, competitive market, perfectly competitive market is really hard to achieve. Well, as we think, time goes by in a long perspective, we're looking at the market. Yeah, it is going to, or government policy also pursuing the market is more competitive. That is another, there is a specific, institute to do it. Antitrust law is another thing. But even though it is, but in reality, it is not happening everyday life. So some part, some portion, we need some kind of intervention. Then how we can do it and what type of approach is necessary is always a debate. But fundamental we learned about it. Yeah, under the perfectly competitive market, theoretically, there is no such intervention is necessary. But there is some kind of situation, market fails. And also, we are dealing with our economy or community going forward with the efficiency. Under the market system, efficiency is good, but we ignore the part of equity issue, inequality, income inequality, wealth inequality, those things. So there is other debate about it. DWL is happening, so government don't touch the market is the key. As the efficiency perspective, yeah, that is a right argument. But something or that kind of conditions we are talking about right now, perfectly competitive market, it is really hard to achieve, and those conditions is not always hold. And fundamentally, government need fund, financial fund. Public finance is necessary, then taxation is the original key is coming out from that directions. Then what we are going to do? So main component of tax revenue is coming out from the income tax. So income tax is really tricky things to deal with, and there is a lot of debate and discussions and disagreement about it. So we are going to discuss about that a little bit in detail when we meet at the Zoom meeting. Today I introduced the cost of taxation. So mainly what you're looking was a DWL, right? I introduced dead weight loss today. And some part of it, you need to understand differentiate and verification of changes of consumer surplus and producer surplus in each area of supply and demand curve. So the triangular shape as a DWL and PSCS and the shape of it and the change and the tax revenue on if the taxation is happening. So taxes imposed, the change of quantity reduced and the price is increased, and under that situation, how we can deal with all those social welfare, each one of the area. So please be comfortable to understand it, and please understand by yourself to how to deal with it. It is a really important issue, and evaluating or measuring exact change of it is a really important part of this content. Thanks for coming today, and have a good one. See you soon.